Well, that didn't really take long at all. Yesterday, if you remember, we had a conversation about Sony's potential 2021 E3 season plans, if they were going to do a long form live stream or piece out their news individually. But essentially, that conversation boiled down to they do have a lot of things to talk about, so they should be talking very soon. And they've done that today through a Q&A on the PlayStation blog with the PlayStation Studios head Hermen Hulst. And we learned a lot of very interesting things, so let's dissect all this. For those of you that want a quick recap, we'll do that right now, and then we'll have our post-mortem conversation after, but here's what we did just learn. So over on the PS blog, the Q&A opens with a question about single-player, narrative-driven games, which there's still a big emphasis, unsurprisingly. They're going to be focusing on a healthy variety of existing franchises, new IP, big games, small games, single-player, and multiplayer, addressing everybody's concerns about the kind of games and experimental things that they might be working on. Hermen also reiterates what we learned about 2 weeks ago in a separate interview, but more than 25 PlayStation Studio titles are in development, almost half being a new IP, and the next question specifically being on new IP, it's still very important to them. Bend Studio is working on a new IP building on the deep open-world systems that they developed with Days Gone, so we have some extra insight into what that next game from Bend will look like after that Days Gone 2 pitch didn't go through. We learned about that. We know they're doing a new IP, but it's still open world. That's also unsurprising. In terms of potential game delays, we do have a quote here from Hermen where it reads, "For Horizon, we think we are on track to release this holiday season, but that isn't quite certain yet, and we're working as hard as we can to confirm that to you as soon as we can." And for God of War, the project started a little later, so we've made the decision to push that game out to next year to ensure that Santa Monica Studio can deliver the amazing God of War game that we all want to play. With these things, something's got to give. It cannot be the quality of our titles, and it surely won't be the health or the well-being of our amazing team. Next, he's asked about PS4 and how that factors into the future, and this is where he says, and I quote, "Where it makes sense to develop a title for both PS4 and PS5, for Horizon Forbidden West, the next God of War, GT7, we'll continue looking at that. And if PS4 owners want to play that game, then they can. If they want to go on and play the PS5 version, that game will be there for them." Now, for PC releases, Hermen emphasizes that PlayStation will remain the place for PS Studio games at launch. They'll then decide the right time to launch games on PC later, so we have confirmation again that we're not going to be seeing day-and-date releases at least anytime soon. And then when asked about Japan, Hermen says Japanese games and talent remain important to PlayStation, and we also learn that Team Asobi is developing a new franchise for all ages with global appeal. So that is everything that we did learn, and it is in stark contrast to what we talked about just yesterday, where we were theorizing, okay, it's E3 season. We know that Sony has plenty of things that they need to update us on, but how are they going to do it? Is it separate state of plays? Is it a long live stream? And it strikes me as odd that they would do this for what is disappointing news on the surface, because if you're going to do that, you almost always want to coincide that with some sort of encouraging development update, like Horizon, for example, where we had that state of play. And so even though we've now gotten an iffy answer on if the game is going to launch in 2021, which is fine considering that, one, I always thought it could go into Q1 2022. That seems appropriate anyway. If the team needs more time, that's okay. I appreciate that Hermen actually went out of his way to say we're not going to compromise on quality or the team's well-being. You know, if you need a few months, go ahead and do it. I think most can agree on that. But having that state of play and seeing how good the game looked, that is fine for hearing about a potential delay. Same for God of War, where most people almost were unanimously saying, yeah, we could see the game going into 2022, especially because we were halfway into this year and we still didn't see anything. So it's not at all surprising. I would have expected some kind of additional trailer or development update to coincide with the delay announcement. They usually do that just to soften the blow, so to speak. Not that they really needed that anyway. I think most people, they knew that, okay, the game's probably 2022. It's not a huge deal, but the cross-gen games, this is certainly a point of contention for a lot, especially because going into PS5, the entire news cycle and certainly the controlled PR messaging for this particular hardware launch was that for Sony, we believe in generations, and it seems like they certainly played into that when you had Microsoft taking a lot of flack for the cross-gen stuff. That was a heavy conversation throughout most of 2020, and it was something that a lot of people really appreciated about Sony's very conservative approach to their console, which is that, hey, we're making games and they're only going to be available on PlayStation 5. And when you combine that with the notion that these machines all have SSDs now, which means free and open game design, you've got an incredible amount of asset and world streaming that's now at every developer's fingertips. That's exciting, but it's only going to happen until we see games truly move over to this generation of machines. And we all were expecting, okay, well, it is still cross-gen period, so a lot of third parties, they're definitely going to be shipping on PS4, X1, that's fine, but we could confidently look at Sony's first party and go, okay, well, if we look at history and how they approach machines, that means we should at the very least see some first party stuff out of them that should take advantage of the SSD right away. And just overall the quality of life improvements that we're seeing with this hardware, right? That's not to be understated too, right? It's not like these the fast SSDs aren't being utilized in Series S and X and PS5. We're seeing incredible load times. They just, games start right away now. You've got amazing fast travel. You're reloading right away after death. And I'm noticing because of those things, I'm playing games much longer than I otherwise would have. They keep you in the game experience, and that's great. But it really is something where we're looking forward to truly next generation titles. This always happens, and for Sony, I don't know how so many are really overlooking this, but in their console history, they have always done just this, not releasing cross-generation games. Whether it's PS1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, there's always one or two first-party games that release for the outgoing platform and only that platform, and then moving forward, first-party moves over to the brand new machine because they want to build compelling software to sell it to potential consumers. They've always done this, so cross-gen for Sony is new, but that is the caveat here. Things do change, and for this cross-generational period, PS4 and PS5, the underlying system architectures are principally very similar, and thus it's much more approachable and affordable to ship on both PS4 and PS5 for a number of teams, big and small. This wasn't really ever the case with console generations prior, where PS3, PS4, they're very different, and that's why we saw a handful of ports, but not everybody did that. From a consumer and a development point of view, you're abandoning PlayStation 3 in that respect, right? So that's why this current generational shift has such amazing scalability, not only for things like reliable backwards compatibility, but also just playing native PS5 and Series S and X games where you're seeing the typical visual enhancements and quality of life improvements that you would expect when playing games on a new console. So that's good. I mean, the thing is, we're just not quite getting this full SSD dream where developers don't really have to worry about their memory budgets anymore. How much they can get out of their world streaming, worrying about how much they can display in front of you reasonably without you turning around and seeing something trying to load incorrectly, right? Things like Ratchet & Clank, Returnal, Demon's Souls, I mean, they all kind of, well, Demon's Souls was a remake, so that's principally a PS3 game, but those are the only handful of truly exclusive next generation games that we've seen up to this point so far. But we do have that state of play for Horizon where it's a visual showcase. We can see what's possible still, and we're still going to get gorgeous looking games, but clearly something like that's going to have a lot of compromises on PS4. But another thing to consider is that these games all started development on PS4, so it's not like these teams aren't familiar with the hardware and they don't realize how they can properly ship this game on current hardware and make it still look fine. And of course, the obvious thing here is that when you ship on both platforms, it's more money. It's a simple business decision to ship on PS4 with 115 million consoles out there, so it seems simple enough, although it is funny to consider that when we're looking at right now with PS5's very low install base, you've got these first-party games, and I believe some third-party stuff too, selling more on PlayStation 5 than PS4. People are very eager to leave PS4 and get into PlayStation 5. Now, you could say that the cross-gen stuff is to circumvent the availability of PS5 consoles, especially when you offer some of the next-gen upgrades for free or maybe a small fee or whatever. Yeah, it totally makes sense, but it is still funny to consider that it was never a problem in years prior. Yes, it's more approachable this time around, but even right now, where PS5 is near impossible to conveniently buy, most games seem to be selling more on PlayStation 5, so people are very eager to buy PS5 games only moving forward. I mean, this is it's really something where it's disappointing on the surface, because you can certainly make the argument all day, every day about how much more the games could have been, but when Horizon drops, it's still going to be a great game. I'm confident it will probably be a fantastic game. Same with God of War. When that trailer shows up, I'm sure a lot of people are really going to, stop caring about the cross-gen thing. Maybe another conversation will spark about what God of War would have looked like without PlayStation 4. But the games will come. They'll look great. They'll play great. They'll still sell very well. I mean, that's another thing, too. This is really a conversation that is held between enthusiasts and gaming forums and kind of the stuff that we always do day in and day out here on this channel and on Twitter and Reset Era, YouTube, wherever the case may be, right? The games are still going to do just fine. This it won't really hurt Sony's bottom line. I'd be shocked if that were really the case. But I'm just surprised that it reached out that far, right? For something like God of War, where that game, surely there was a chance that God of War and Gran Turismo 7 was PS5 only, because if we're considering the timetable here, that would have been year 2 of the platform cycle, and that's where you start to see even third parties abandon the outgoing machines. But like we said, maybe things have changed. Maybe even third parties will do cross-gen longer than we typically see, because it is more approachable and affordable. That's a very real possibility. But these games will still come. They'll play great. They'll look great. I mean, good video games are still coming. I think you don't want to get too hung up on this cross-gen thing, because you're here to play games, and they're still gonna be fantastic. But maybe some real disappointment sets in when you do start to consider that now we're looking at year 3 or year 4 for a lot of Sony's first party to ship only on PlayStation 5. And when you do target a single platform, when you don't have a minimum spec sheet that is significantly lower, you are able to extract and do a lot more. So there's definitely a case to be made for the games that we could have gotten if they're only available on PS5, and it looks like the waiting time for that is going to be longer. One thing is for sure, though, Sony's definitely had a lot of contradicting things being put out there, and their PR is not in the best shape handling PlayStation 5 right now. But I mean, again, like we've said, it's not really going to hurt their bottom line, at least right now in the short term. The console's still doing really well. The games will come, they'll play great and all that stuff. It's not all doom and gloom. I've never really been in that camp. The company is still in a much better position with PS5 than, say, PS4 was in 2013, or PS3 in 2006, of course. So they've still got a compelling piece of hardware, and in the short term, it's going to do really well. It's just the messaging is what Sony's always been bad with, and with PS5, that's clearly still an area where the company needs to do some serious work to be more transparent in how they're rolling out some of their business practices and their software. Thank you so much for joining me in yet another conversation. If you haven't yet, please subscribe for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates that are here on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan. And that is it. I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.